In heraldry, variations of the field are any of a number of ways that a field may be covered with a pattern, rather than a flat tincture or a simple division of the field. Blazoning of French adjectives. Variations of the field have present a particular problem concerning consistent spelling of adjectival endings in English blazons, because heraldry developed at a time when English clerks wrote in Anglo-Norman French. Many terms in English heraldry are of French origin, as is the practice of placing most adjectives after nouns rather than before. A problem arises as to acceptable spellings of French words used in English blazons, especially in the case of adjectival endings, determined in normal French usage by gender and number. It is considered by some heraldic authorities as pedantry to adopt strictly correct linguistic usage for English blazons. To describe two hands as a paumes because the word main is feminine in French, savours somewhat of pedantry. A person may be a good armourist and a tolerable French scholar, and still be uncertain whether an escallop shell covered with bezants should be blazoned as bezante or bezantae. Cousins adopted the convention of spelling all French adjectives in the masculine singular, without regard to the gender and number of the nouns they qualify. However, as Cousins admits, the commoner convention is to spell all French adjectives in the feminine singular form. For example, a chief undeaqt and a saltar undeaqt, even though the French nouns chef and sautoir are in fact masculine. Patterning with ordinaries and subordinaries. The diminutives of the ordinaries are frequently employed to vary the field. Any of these patterns may be counterchanged by the addition of a division line. For example, Barry Argent and Azure, counterchanged Professor Chequi or Angules, counterchanged per chevron, Barry, Pally, Bendy when the field is patterned with an even number of horizontal stripes. This is described as Barry e.g. of 6 or 8, usually of a color and metal specified, e.g. Barry of 6 argent and gules. More rarely, a Barry field can be of 2 colors or 2 metals. The arms of the Kingdom of Hawaii show a very unusual example of Barry of 3 different tinctures, and there are even more exceptional examples of Barry of a single tincture, as in the arms of Kempton on the Zurich roll. The arms of Eifelsberg somewhere provide a perhaps unique example of Barry of 4 different tinctures that do not repeat. With 10 or more pieces, the field is described as baruli. A field having the appearance of a number of narrow piles throughout issuing from the dexter of sinister flanks is Barry pali. Composed of pallets, the field is pally. Of bendlets, bendy, in a bend sinister-wise fashion, bendy sinister. Of chevronels, chevrony. In modern practice the number of pieces is nearly always even. A shield of 13 vertical stripes, alternating argent and gules, would not be pally of 13 argent and gules, but argent 6 pallets gules. One unusual design is described in part as bendy of 3, though, as each third is again divided, the effect is of a 6-part division. If no number of pieces is specified, it may be left up to the heraldic artist. An instance of a fess, palisable, argent, celestine occurs in the arms of the 158th Quartermaster Battalion of the United States Army. Although this is atypical terminology and it could be argued that the fess should be blazoned as purple index to purple sable and argent, and in sinister purple blue celeste and or. In the modern arms of the Count of Schwarzburg, the quarters are divided by a cross-bendy of 3 tinctures. When the shield is divided by lines both palewise and bendwise, with the pieces colored alternately like a chessboard, this is pali-bendy. If the diagonal lines are reversed, pali-bendy sinister. If horizontal rather than vertical lines are used, Barry-bendy, and mutatus mutandis, Barry-bendy sinister. A field which seems to be composed of a number of triangular pieces is Barry bendy and bendy sinister. Chequy. When divided by palewise and fesswise lines into a checkered pattern, the field is chequy. The coat of arms of Croatia, chequy gules and argent, is well known. The arms of Lycroda, Bankita, Bismarck, showed chequy fimbriated. The arms of the 85th Air Division of the United States Air Force show a chequy grid on part of the field, though this is to be distinguished from chequy. The number of checkers is generally indeterminate, though the fess in the arms of Robert Stewart, Lord of Lorne, they are blazoned as being of 4 tracts, and in arms of Toledo, 15 checkers are specified. The number of vertical rows can also be specified. When a bend sinister, or one of their diminutives, is chequy, the checkers follow the direction of the bend unless otherwise specified. James Parker cites the French term équipe to mean chequy of 9, though mentions that this is identical to a cross-quarter pierced. He also gives the arms of prospect as an unusual example of chequy. Chequy in perspective, argent and sable. This must be distinguished from cubes as a charge. Chequy is not fanciable, that is, the lines of chequy cannot be modified by lines of partition. Lozenge, fusili, masculi and rustre. When the shield is divided by both bendwise and bendwise sinister lines, creating a field of lozenges. The result is lozenge. A field lozenge must be distinguished from an ordinary such as a bend which is blazoned of one tincture and called lozenge. This means that the ordinary is entirely composed of lozenges, touching that their obtuse corners. Such a arrangement is better blazoned as lozenges bendwise. In pali-bendy, the bendwise lines are supposed to be less acute than in plain lozenge. Part of the field of the arms of the 544th Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance Group of the United States Air Force is lozenge in perspective. A field fusili can be very difficult to distinguish from a field lozenge. The fusile is supposed to be proportionately narrower than the lozenge, and the bendwise and bendwise sinister lines are therefore more steeply sloped. A field masculi is composed entirely of mascules, that is, lozenges pierced with a lozenge shape. This creates a solid fretwork surface and is to be distinguished from a field fretti. An extremely rare, possibly unique example of a field rustre counterchanged rusters occurs in Canadian heraldry in the arms of R.C. Purdy Chocolates Limited. Gyrone, a shield that is divided chordally and per saltire, forming a triangular pieces, is gyrone. This is technically a field covered with gyrons, a rare charge in the form of a wedge, shown individually in the well-known arms of Mortimer. Possibly the best-known example is in the arms of the ancient Scottish family of Campbell. Gyrone of 8 or and sable, borne most notably by the Duke of Argyll, chief of the clan Campbell. The first tincture in the blazon is that of the triangle index to chief. Gyrone can also have a different number of pieces than 8. For example, Sir William Stocker, Lord Mayor of London, had a field gyrone of 6. They may be gyrone of 10 or 12, and the arms of Claxon provide an example of gyrone of 16. While the gyrons of gyrone almost invariably meet in the fess point, the arms of the University of Zululand are an unusual example of gyrone, meeting in the nombril point. Gyrone can be modified by the lines of partition. The counting arms of Maugeron show gyrone of 6, clearly deemed Malgerone. Variations of lines. Any of the division lines composing the variations of the field above may be blazoned with most of the different line shapes, e.g. Palinebulae of 6, or and sable. One very common use of this is Barry wavy azure and argent. This is often used to represent either water or a body of water in general, or the sea in particular, though there are other if less commonly used methods of representing the sea, including in a more naturalistic manner. Fretti and trellisé. A field fretti is composed of bendlets and bendlets sinister or scarps interleaved over one another to give the impression of a trellis, although almost invariably the bendlets and scarps are of the same tincture. There is an example in which they are of two different metals. Objects can be placed in the position of the bendlets and bendlets sinister and described as fretti or, as in the arms of the Muenbeeg town commissioners. Party Professor Fretti of blackthorn branches leaves proper and ermine fes wavy azure. Square fretti is similarly composed of barrelets and pallets. Trellisé appears in the arms of Luke Norman Tellier, where it consists of bendlets sinister and barrelets interlaced. Seme. When the field is described as a semi of a subordinary or other charge, it is depicted as being scattered with many copies of that charge. Seme is regarded as part of the field and thus within the opening section of the blazon describing the field before the first comma. Thus, azure semi de lis or not azure semi de lis, or a charge on top would be blazoned azure semi de lis or a bent argent. To avoid confusion with the simple use of a large number of the same charge, the charges semi are ideally depicted cut off at the edge of the field, though in olden depictions this is often not the case. An example of this can be found in the modern coat of arms of Denmark, which now features 3 lions among 9 hearts, but the ancient arms depicted 3 leopards on a semi of hearts, the number of which varied and was not fixed at 9 until 1819. There are also some exceptions to this, as in the case of some bordures blazoned seme, which are usually depicted with a discrete number of the charge. Thus, for example, the arms of Jesus College, Cambridge, which despite a blazon of seam, are invariably depicted with either 8 or 10 crowns gold on its bordure. A large number of any one charge arranged as if upon an invisible bordure is said to be in orly, an orly being a diminutive band within the bordure. Most small charges can be depicted as seme, e.g., seme of roses, seme of estoiles, and so forth. In English heraldry, several types of small charges have special terms to refer to the state as seme, seme of crosslets, crozily, seme of fleurs de lis, seme de lis, seme of bezants, bezante, seme of plates, plate, seme of billets, billete, seme of annulets, annuleti, seme of sparks, etoncelle, seme of gouts, goutea, with variants, goutea de sang, goutea de poi, sable, goutea de o, goutea de larmes, goutea d'olives. Seme of torcho, tortily. When a field seme is of a metal, the charges strewn on it must be of a tincture, and vice versa, so as not to offend the rule of tincture. However, a field seme does not restrict the tinctures available for the major charges, as might be assumed from a stricter interpretation of the rule of tincture. Thus, the arms of the azure billeti or a lion rampant or armed and langed gules. Clearly here there will be instances of metal on metal. In Canadian heraldry the arms of Hockina profess wavy gules and azure. In chief the lion pass and guard enter beneath the feet a musket lying facewise proper, the base semi of fleurs de lis confusedly dispersed of the third, alluding to an incident in which the Canadian soldier Thomas Hocken caused the French to scatter. The 1995 to 2002 arms of Rogaška Slatina, Slovenia show that semi of discs are decreasing in size from base to chief. The heraldic furs of the ermine family appear to be semi of the ermine dots, but they are not counted as such, but fields semi of ermine spots are, as in the coat of Wrexham County Borough Council. Tapissé of wheat. A field tapissé of wheat is entirely covered by an interlocking stylized pattern looking like a wheat field. Honeycomb. The town of Balani, Latvia, has part of its field honeycombed. Another example of this is in the arms of Fusagasugá, Cundinamarca, Colombia. Masoned. A field or ordinary mason shows a pattern like that of a brick or ashlar stone wall. This can be proper, or of a named tincture. The tincture relates to the mortar between the stones or bricks, the latter being argent. A wall of red bricks with white mortar is thus blazoned. Gules masoned argent. Papillony. A field papillony shows a pattern like the wings of a butterfly, though this is categorized as a fur. The number of rows of papillony is sometimes defined, such as 7 in the arms of the Leberici family of Bologna. The arms of the French barons de Chateaubriand were gules papillony, or the Italian term squamoso and the French écaillé, meaning scaly, of similar. Pied at random. Used in some South African codes, this means patterned like the markings of a bull or cow. There is at least one example that is more elaborately blazoned. Folds. The arms of the Special Troops Battalion of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division of the United States Army has the unique field papale sable and gules with stylized folds sanguine, the sinister half of the field symbolizing a warrior's cape. Diapering. In English heraldry, diapering is not considered a variation of the field. It is not specified in blazon, being a decision of the individual artist. A coat depicted with diapering is considered the same as a coat drawn from the same blazon but depicted without diapering. In French heraldry, diapering is sometimes explicitly blazoned.